Do you have type 2 diabetes and have you struggled with your car breaking down and it caused your blood sugar levels to become disastrous? Then I got a tip for you. Before we get started, my name is Patrick with the Diabetes Manager Group. I am a diabetes coach where I help people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes learn how to reverse it and keep it reversed. So I want to share a experience that I've had recently at the start of this year till now. Earlier in this year, I noticed that my car has been experiencing some issues with the gas pedal not quite working as much as it's supposed to. And all of a sudden, as I was driving my 2014 Nissan Pathfinder, everything went kaput. I tried to press on my gas pedal on my way to the gym. It was not moving at all whatsoever. Everything started to shut down. So I turned my steering wheel to make it into the parking lot and was trying to figure out what was going on. At first, I thought my car needed to be jumped. I looked at my starter kit, found out that the battery was dead, which was very unfortunate. And then I called my friends to see who could help me jumpstart my car. They came over, we tried to jump it, no bueno. And fortunately, someone on the side of the building was able to come over to let us borrow their jumper cables to see if maybe their car could help jumpstart my car. And then, out of further ado, nothing. And this was causing my stress to go like crazy. And for those who don't know, stress can be one of the causes for type 2 diabetes and prediabetes when it is prolonged. Additionally, the effects that it can have for blood sugars, it's due to a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone that causes blood sugars to go up because it prevents the cells from being insulin sensitive at that time. So it prevents the insulin from attaching onto the cells and properly allowing the blood sugars to be sent into the organs and the muscles for it to be used up to lower those blood sugars effectively and get the blood sugars to where it needs to go. And it also stimulates the liver to produce more glucose in order for it to supply more glucose to other parts of the body. So it's a very interesting process. And unfortunately, in my situation, my stress was causing my blood sugars to become really high, and it was not a great time. And then I called the tow truck company with my insurance. And fortunately, we were able to get it towed. I took it to a mechanic, and they said that my alternator was dead. So I was receiving different options that they had where I could buy a used alternator and it would come with the warranty, or I could buy a brand new alternator that is not of the Nissan brand. I didn't know of that at the time. And I decided to go with the used one, thinking that I could save more money. Then the new one came in, was able to replace it appropriately, and I was back to driving. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, I was at an intersection and I need to press the gas pedal to make it across the intersection. And all of a sudden, this happened again. I tried to press my gas pedal, it would not move whatsoever. I had some electricity, and unfortunately, nothing was going great at that time either. My carpooling mates, my roommates, as we were trying to head to school, were saying, "Hey, try to hit that gas pedal a bit more." And I was in there and I was stepping on it. And I just had this weird feeling that something wasn't right. And then I told them so they could hear me say, "It's not moving." And for them, they were saying, "What do you mean it's not moving?" I'm like, "Look, I'm trying to press on the gas pedal. It's not moving whatsoever. Can't you see this?" And then we got out of the car to figure out what was going on. I was starting to smell some burning, and we were thinking that my car overheated because I got it replaced with another alternator. And apparently, my cooling fluid was also out too, which is very unfortunate at the time. The fortunate thing is we had a friend who was behind us that was able to help us get our car parked more into the safe side so that people can make it through that intersection. And he came back with the cooling fluid after he drove off to get some cooling fluid and then came back to help us out. Tried starting up the car again, no luck whatsoever. And it was back to needing to call the mechanic and having to drive it back to the car mechanics to figure out what was going on. So went to classes, and fortunately my friend gave us a ride back over there. And then I got the phone calls and was trying to figure out what was going on and learned that my car alternator was dead again. But due to the warranty, I was able to get a new one. Also, not a Nissan brand at the time. Of course, this is leaving me with a lot of anxiety, even more stress, blood sugar's going wonky. And of course, the financial situation was just horrendous. I did not want to think about it whatsoever. And for someone with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes where that stressful situation is occurring, something that I found helpful in those moments is practicing deep breathing. So with the cortisol levels rising up, one of the best ways to relieve it is to do some deep breathing where we could take a deep breath in, deep breath out, doing that multiple times. That's able to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest portion of it, to lower our cortisol levels and focusing on what I could control, which was figuring out what choices I needed to make in order to get my car situation figured out. And then I decided to go in to figure out what was going on with my car. And of course, with the car alternator going out, I was able to get that fully replaced with a brand new one. So I thought, okay, we should be in the clear and I should be good to go. Fast forward to a few months later again, I start to see the battery sign and my brake light sign going on intermittently while ever I'm driving around. At first, it wasn't doing anything to my car. I was pressing the buttons on the side to see what was going on there, and it wasn't really affecting my car too much until I started smelling a burning smell even when I went on short drives. I figured must be something going on with my oil or the gas. I didn't think too much of it at the time until I decided that enough was enough and I scheduled a meeting to meet with the Nissan dealership where the mechanics were focused on working with Nissan made cars. And I had that all scheduled, ready to go, thinking that I would be good until I came into the Nissan dealership and they said, unfortunately, the system that I scheduled online wasn't working and I need to schedule for another time next week. Then I decided, okay, I get off my clinical rotations around at that time on Friday. So I figured should be all good to go. We'll be fine. Fast forward to that Wednesday, as I was driving back home from my clinical rotation and into my neighborhood, I was making a turn and I heard a loud bang and my gas pedal, my accelerator wasn't working again. And I figured, okay, I just need to try and drift into my house and then let's see if I can try and make it to garage. I had this ledge to make it into my car. I was trying to press on it, but it just wasn't going. And I realized it's probably my alternator being dead again. Let's reverse my car out, let the angle help with repositioning my car. And lo and behold, took it to Nissan and learned that my car alternator was kaput again, despite it being a new one of a different brand. And they said Nissan car parts isn't really, it's Nissan cars are very sensitive to the other parts that aren't Nissan for bigger things such as in a car alternator. So when I got that fixed, fortunately, I was able to be home free again and my car is working just fine. And I hope everyone else's cars is working well. And if not, these warning signs could be a sign for one to take it to their dealership to make sure that they get the right part for it. And I started thinking, how does this affect people with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes, aside from the stressful situation, but more at a larger scale? And I realized that going to a mechanic that isn't specializing in Nissan cars for an important part of the car, such as an alternator, they could figure out what's going on with it. However, the solutions that they provide may not be specialized for the car itself. And then they may even have a better solution, but it's still not specialized for the car itself. So I realized that the same concept applies for people with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes whenever they're seeing their general healthcare providers. Sure, they might be educated with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes, and they know the medications that would be used for it. However, they may not know the education that's associated with the lifestyle factors, such as appropriate nutrition, how physical activity can actually impact blood sugar levels and controlling it appropriately. And that, lo and behold, where if the first line route of medications isn't quite working, then they would say, all right, see a dietitian and see if they can help you out. And then if that dietitian would say, oh, all you need to do is eat 45 grams of carbs for every single meal setting, and you should be fine with type 2 diabetes. But then the diabetes isn't getting better. In fact, it might be getting worse. I'm sure some people may have experienced that. It just gets frustrating because then they're put on more medications and they start to feel more weary and they start to experience more of the experiences that diabetes brings, which is unfortunate, such as the diabetic neuropathy. So the tingling sensation and the burning sensation or the numbing sensation that happens down on the feet. So I highly recommend foot inspections of people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And for those who've already reversed it, to do that constantly. So checking the top side of your foot, the bottom side of your foot, and in between the toes to inspect for any wounds, lacerations, cuts, or bruises. Because if there is any over there, make sure to monitor it and bandage it up appropriately. If it's not getting better, contact a medical provider so that can be properly addressed, since 80% of the wounds that are caused from type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, or from those who reversed it, it can lead to an amputation that can be reversible by doing those foot inspections daily. So side tangent over there. However, hopefully that tip is helpful for folks to prevent an amputation and save lives that way. So moving forward for the situation at hand with taking advice from a general healthcare provider who may know things about type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, but may not know the specialized way in doing so. So by doing that, of course, that can lead to a lot of anguish and anxiety, and then people wanting to go onto social media to see if there's any health gurus or diabetes specialists that can help them out. And then they start to hear that carbohydrates are the issue and the problem. And going carnivore is the way to go. Going keto is the way to go. Going low carb is the way to go. And when they try to do that, it may have worked in the short term. Blood sugars may have looked amazing. However, and the A1C scores are looking amazing. However, the cholesterol levels or triglycerides may look higher compared to before, even though the A1Cs are looking better. But the issue about it is the test being conducted also doing a oral glucose tolerance test, which means taking a sugar tablet and assessing in real time how one's body reacts to the blood glucose levels once that tablet is eaten, because that really shows if one has truly reversed their type 2 diabetes or prediabetes is if we put in a stressful environment by eating that blood glucose, by taking the oral glucose tolerance test to see what's going on with it. And if the body doesn't do well in being able to lower those blood sugar levels appropriately with the insulin responses, that means that the type 2 diabetes is not really reversed. So A1C scores, yes, it may be considered the gold standard. However, it's not putting the body in more of a stressful environment in that situation, which means that it needs more of a variety of different tests with there. Additionally, fasted insulin scores is another way to measure and assess how well the body is for its insulin sensitivity, because A1C scores can look fine. However, fasted insulin scores can look pretty high, and that would indicate more of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes is looming there, because the root cause of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes is insulin resistance. And figuring out how to reverse that is a main key at hand. And some things that could cause it, as I mentioned before, could be chronic stress. So having way too much cortisol chronically over periods of time. Short periods of time, cortisol is good because it heightens our fight or flight responses, gets us prepared for any stressful situations, and heightens our senses. However, if it's done for too long, that becomes of an issue where now it's preventing our organs from being able to use those blood sugars appropriately and actually move it from the blood to the organs to lower it effectively, that it just wreaks havoc on the body, unfortunately. So by being able to address those factors with other specialized tests, such as the blood, the insulin, the fasted insulin scores and the oral glucose tolerance test, those can be other indicators in addition to an A1C score that could really predict if one still has type 2 diabetes or not. And with that, the keto diet and the carnivore diet and some other diets that are out there, it may not be the best option for people because it's not sustainable, as well as not to mention if cholesterol is getting higher and triglycerides are getting higher. So triglycerides is essentially meaning what are the fat levels within the bloodstream in simpler terms, that can become an issue because what about the risk of a heart attack? Because if there's too much fat buildup, that can cause atherosclerosis or hardening of our arteries. That could lead to a stroke or it could lead to a heart attack, which are also complications of having type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And those fatty deposits, it can lead to more insulin resistance. So that in itself becomes an issue where, yeah, we fix the issue, but it's not the right way to address it. It's like with my car situation where I got a new car alternator, but it just wasn't a right fit for my Nissan Pathfinder because it's still incompatible that way. So that's what it's similar to, where it could still lead to those issues later on. So the main thing to address it, it's more about what are the factors that's causing the type 2 diabetes? Is it due to lack of sleep, which leads to increased stress in the body? That if one is able to optimize their sleep by installing blackout curtains, doing a sleep meditation video before going to bed to have effective sleep, that could be very beneficial in addressing that way. Other things I can look at it too is if one is consuming a larger amount of carbohydrates without a healthy mix of fiber and protein, that can be one of the issues too that's leading to type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, because if there is too much of the carbohydrates that's consumed, generally it's not very filling, and that can lead to people overeating and oversnacking, which that excess in food eaten can lead to it converting into fats as stored energy. But if that stored energy is not used up at all, then that could build up in the organs, leading to more insulin resistance and making type 2 diabetes happen because of that way. So instead, if we're able to incorporate more proteins and fiber, one's able to feel fuller for longer. And the protein is able to help build the muscles, where muscles are highly insulin sensitive. So that it means that whenever the muscles are moving around or stabilizing our joints, it's able to say, hey, I need more blood sugars. So the blood sugars is able to transfer and move to the muscles to lower it down, as muscles act like a sponge to soak up all those blood sugars to keep our joints in place and moving our joints appropriately, and also to protect our joints and other parts of our body. And then for the fiber, that helps as a huge component because it slows down the digestion process of the carbohydrates, the regular sugars that's out there. Additionally, it also helps with fats as well and slowing down the process of digesting those, that it can prevent the blood sugars from spiking and having a harder time actually lowering down and keeping them in ranges. So by pairing more of those with eating regular carbohydrates, one can see a lot of great benefits with it, where they'll feel fuller for longer. So it leads to decrease the calories that would lead to gaining more fat mass. It could also improve strengthening up those muscles by repairing them, because our muscles need protein to function appropriately. And then another thing too is that fiber, it helps slow down the digestion process, as well as lowering cholesterol levels, triglyceride levels, that incorporating more fiber would be great. And things that I use for myself when I had prediabetes and was able to successfully reverse my prediabetes and kept it reversed for 1.5 years now, was adding in oatmeal into my diet each morning. And of course, oatmeal tastes boring by itself. So of course I add peanut butter, which also has fiber and healthy fats. And I add cinnamon to it, which also has been shown to improve blood sugar levels and control of it. So I mix all of those together. And since eating that, that's been helpful in allowing my cholesterol levels to go down, my A1C scores to go down, and effectively keeping my prediabetes reversed. And other people with type 2 diabetes, the clients that I've worked with, they've also found huge benefits with that as well. So by doing that and taking that approach, where anytime one really wants to have a sweet or a carbohydrate or a sugar source, whether that's like white rice or a candy or other treats, being sure to incorporate proteins and fiber with it can be very helpful in preventing how high it can go and helping it in the long term for reversing the type 2 diabetes or the prediabetes if the diet is the main factor that's causing the type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. The other factor could be if one is experiencing a eating disorder or disordered eating. So when I did wrestling back in high school, one of the issues that I faced was craving foods that by the time it came around where I saw it, the craving just kept on hitting me, built up, came worse. I got really hangry until I caved in and just binged all out to eat that food. And I repeated that cycle over and over again. And it was horrendous for my mental health because I see a food that I used to love, but now I do love, but I also hate because I know it's not going to help me with the diet that I have to maintain my weight for wrestling. That causes so much of the inner conflict, which causes more stress. And of course, me binge eating, that led to my blood sugars being placed out of control significantly when that happened. And what I learned from working with people who are mental health therapists and people who specialized in disordered eating and eating disorders is that making sure to identify the root cause of what's going on there. Is it something that has been done through past trauma that needs to be addressed in order for one to let go of it to fully enjoy the foods again? Or was it due to having type 2 diabetes that now that has developed? Instead, focusing on how can we address that so that one can have a healthier relationship with foods, that will be significantly better in reducing those cravings and managing the type 2 diabetes and prediabetes appropriately. So what I found helpful with it, it would be looking at what are the factors for the food craving. If the food craving is, man, I really want some rice with curry on there, then learning how to balance having that rice when that craving sits in will be a good thing. And then figure out what can I add to this so that this can become more nutrient dense. And what I mean by nutrient dense, as I alluded to before, would be pairing more proteins, pairing more fiber with that set of rice, and taking smaller amounts of that rice can be super helpful in managing those blood sugars appropriately while addressing that craving. Because as we all know, whenever someone has that craving, and I'm referencing the women who have had children before, sometimes they get those weirdest cravings that nothing except for the desired food or snack hits it. That's the same thing for other folks who have those cravings. So by being able to be smart about it, seeking mental health therapists as needed, if that's the case, or learning how to have the food craving by itself and feeling okay with it, that is a great solution from my perspective. That's helped plenty of clients that I've worked with, as well as myself, in healing the mental health side and being able to enjoy and love food again. So, anyways, moral of the story, it's if one is ever having car disruptions or issues, that can also be projective of what is going on for our bodies per se. Because like the car with my issues, I noticed something was going on with the symptoms that I've had of feeling like I needed to go to the bathroom all the time, constantly hungry, had hunger pains where it felt like someone had a knife stabbing into my stomach, twisting my stomach out. And then the thirst that I needed to drink an entire ocean. Those were the things and the signs of what my car was doing until it broke down. And then I thought by going onto social media to see what diets are available. Oh, I just need to cut out carbs, go keto, go carnivore. But then I realized it wasn't really healthy for me, that it's more time to do a holistic approach where I looked at everything. And that was the actual part for my Nissan, a Nissan alternator for my Nissan car. And for me, it's specific diabetes reversal tips that best served me, and then other tips that I've learned to help serve my clients so that they can be successful in reversing their type 2 diabetes and prediabetes appropriately. So, anyways, thank you all so much for tuning into this video. I plan to share more long form tips of my journey, my failures that I've had, and my successes that I've had of how I was able to reverse my pre-diabetes and kept it reversed for 1.5 years now of the making of this video, and the lessons that I've had with my grandpa who had type 2 diabetes and unfortunately passed away from the complications, what I've learned from them to share to you so that you can live the life that you want, to incorporate the foods that you love and reversing type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes, because we all know life is short and we want to be able to live it on our terms. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please subscribe and leave a comment about your thoughts and share this video with anyone you think it'd be helpful for. See you in the next video.